Chapter 5. The Winds of Orion. Begirt with many a blessing star, stood the great giant Aldebaran, Orion, hunter of the beast. His sword hung gleaming by his side, and on his arm the lion's hide, scattered across the midnight air the golden radiance of its hair. Longfellow. Canst thou bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Job 38:31. When two opposite polarities meet, they are naturally attracted. When they attempt fusion rather than integration, they produce a force of enormous energy. They produce sparks. They produce change. Sometimes they even produce pain. This was the case with the civilization of Lyra that attempted integration within the Vegan and Sirius star system. The conflict began playing out there, but was energetically expanded to include Orion. Its beginning was a Lyran conflict. Through generations it evolved into a new race war, that of the Orions. As generations passed, each side lost touch with what they were fighting for, yet the anguish continued. The stakes were clearly marked. The negative side perpetuated the idea of service to self within their philosophy. If one served the self, the whole was served. What they did not realize was they were denying the whole by the way they chose to carry out this philosophy, and this translated as the need for domination. These were dark times indeed. Domination entailed behavior that Earth humans had never experienced. Genetic manipulation of bloodlines was common, in an attempt to dilute or concentrate power. What humans know as black magic was a common practice. Beings were so saturated with their own fear that they struck out all who were different. The Earth legends of sword and sorcery are dim remembrance carried in the etheric cell memory from the dark times of Orion. The positive side epitomized the idea of service to others. It was their belief that the only way to survive was to be subservient, even at the expense of the self. So an interesting dynamic was played out. There were those individuals who were the dominators and those who were too willing to play the victim role. These positives felt that to support this whole, they must serve the whole and relinquish the self. In reality, they were denying themselves as being a valid portion of that whole. The Orion civilization was one of the very few that evolved into a state of technological advancement while still being in a state of intense spiritual conflict. Eons of time passed while the drama continued playing out. It began with basic emotional manipulation all the way to the other side of the spectrum. Manipulation using highly advanced technological tools. Reincarnationally speaking, the same souls incarnated time and time again, switching sides, trying to find a way to bring the whole struggle into balance. Within Orion history, there's always been underground resistance. Throughout the ages, its strength ebbed and flowed like the pulses of the red giant Betelgeuse. Usually they would be discovered by the negatives and disbanded and punished. Any time they built up some momentum, it radiated too loudly, and they were found. As the philosophy of the resistance solidified, it became apparent that they needed to squelch the radiation of their ideas. They decided instead to symbolically absorb. They allowed people to come to them. They became like a black hole which was unable to be seen, but the force and momentum of their energy was as powerful as a silent wind. Their organization was thus called the Black League. The symbol of the struggle became the Black Dragon. A new aspect of the drama began to unfold. Now there were three facets to the struggle. There were the dominators, the victims, and the resistance, fueled by the friction of two polarities. The Black League became quite successful in thwarting the efforts of the dominators, known as the Orion Empire. However, it was only enough to reduce their momentum to a standstill. An energy impasse was reached. Within the souls of these repressed people existed a great desperation. They knew the extent of the Orion Empire's control. The Empire had devised ways to control astral bodies. Death was no longer freedom. Many individuals studied with heretic teachers to learn the ancient knowledge of dimensional conscious travel. Few were successful, but those who were found a way out of the Orion system forever. Through focused concentration and disengagement from the Orion mass conscious belief system, a small percentage of individuals were able to leave their bodies die and successfully target or hone in on beings who had escaped or were reincarnated on Earth from Orion. Once these beings were targeted, the Orion entity was able to create a window through which he or she could travel. When he or she came through the window and incarnated on Earth, that being became lost in the Earth's mass consciousness. This was a safety mechanism. If they did not know their own identity, they could not be pursued by the Orion Empire. The escapees then entered Earth's reincarnational cycle and most likely continued to play out the Orion drama unconsciously within their soul pattern. At times, they could have been immediately pursued through the window of the Orion Empire representatives. Often these Empire representatives became caught in Earth mass consciousness as well, and had to enter the reincarnational cycle. When they incarnated, they carried their old Orion desire for control with them. As the desperation grew, the Black League decided to fight even harder. They had people who played both sides. Smuggled reports from informants resulted in an even more intense resistance effort. They began to employ tactics borrowed from the dominators. All this was done in the name of freedom. They eventually learned that freedom was elusive and the conflict intensified. With all their efforts, the Black League could not understand why they were not being successful in liberating the victims. They became discouraged. The people hungered for a form of spirituality. But all that was present was a gnawing emptiness and fear. Nothing worked. For a few generations, the Black League remained stagnant, only an idea, nothing more. Then something miraculous occurred. During generations of spiritual gestation, a seed began to grow. A soul incarnated who embodied all the hopes and dreams of the Orion races and had none of the hatred or fear. When he was born, he was safely contained in an energetically and emotionally neutral environment deep within the planet, so that he would not become polarized. At adulthood, he began to teach. What he taught began to shed new light on the struggle. What he proposed could end it once and for all. He taught universal laws. Integration cannot be achieved through negativity. The Black League was fighting fire with fire, only creating a blaze instead of peace. One must integrate positivity and negativity to the balance point. One must love and not fear. The idea of peace and freedom must be loved so much that one is willing to live it in one's soul despite outside manifestation. The Black League thus learned that their intentions were good, but their actions only caused more of what they despised. This realization occurred on mass levels. It opened new doors of spirituality for the people of these oppressed worlds. They had a long way to go, but at least they now knew where to start. Once the dynamic began to be understood from higher levels, it was decided that they would transmute this energy by moving outward into the galaxy and starting fresh. From these higher levels, they called upon the founders to assist them in choosing a world. Of primary concern was an assurance that all the tools were provided on this new world for these adventure beings to begin transmutation of the Orion energy. Free will, choice, rather than the controlled drama of Orion, was the primary tool, as well as a latent DNA code that would trigger a desire for social preservation when or if it became possible for them to self-destruct. The world that was chosen was Earth. The founders then began engaging various physical groups to carry out the Earth inception. Earth has manifested the Orion drama in an attempt to balance polarity throughout humankind's history. The fall of Atlantis, the Roman Empire, and the ongoing religious wars are all examples of memory patterns from Orion that are emerging to be cleared. Throughout all these dramas, the human race has survived and has kept total oppression at bay. Humanity continues to play out the same dynamic: victim, perpetrators, and resistance. However, this time light is beginning to spread, and even the resistance is beginning to learn early on that one cannot fight fire with fire. The contemporary Orion civilization, existing in the same time continuum as present-day Earth, has already healed its conflict. Because Earth is still playing out Orion's past in an attempt to balance it for itself, the primary contact humanity receives from Orion has been judged to be negative. The Men in Black phenomena, as well as some manifestations of the Illuminati structure, are playing out the past Orion need for control. The Men in Black have several origins. Some are human incarnations from Orion and or negatively oriented Sirius energy. Others are actual past Orions who have traveled forward in time to present-day Earth. These include Empire representatives who were caught in the Earth mass consciousness as they pursued Orion escapees. They perceive Earth as a threat. From their point of view, as humanity awakens and liberates itself, it magnetizes the oppressed Orion beings to seek freedom here. They want to keep these windows of opportunity closed for the victims of Orion, keep Earth unempowered, and stay in total control. The men in black are only one manifestation of this idea. Generally, it is played out on Earth in a much more subtle way. Those individuals who carry the oppressive patterns from Orion act from the soul memory and are not necessarily conscious in their desire for absolute control. In researching 20th century Men in Black encounters, one comes across the iconic behavior of these beings. They function at a very autonomous level and seem to never claim for themselves the power that they so single-mindedly attempt to wrest from humans. This may suggest that the Men in Black is only a pawn in perhaps an even more bizarre power struggle. The Orion drama is not an experiment done to someone by someone else. All those who chose to be part of the Earth transmutation do so through their free will. This transmutation or integration will affect the entire galactic family created through the dimensional infusion. This would initiate the beginning process of the integration back through the prism of Lyra. The integrated polarities can thus be termed the Orion light. There were stages built into the transmutation project from which the founders would be able to gauge its progress. The first stage was a simple seeding and developing of third-density life into a strong genetic strain on Earth. The subsequent stages involved various development of civilization. The crucial stage is occurring presently upon the Earth, the mass reawakening of millions of souls to a greater spiritual purpose. This awakening occurs naturally and begins to accelerate a widening of the gap between the positive and negative poles, as seen presently within society. The accentuation of this gap serves to polarize and highlight the choices society may take, making it clear that choices must be made at this point in time. Humanity does not have the ugliness and pain of a tormented past to the extent that the Orions had. As the Earth awakens, all the tools become visible for humanity to claim responsibility for the whole and the self. The painful Orion memories may continue to surface, but the healing of them will occur through humanity's proclamation of freedom and liberation. When the dimensional infusion occurred, there were some individual and group consciousness who chose to remain dormant. They allowed themselves to serve as archetypes and could be awakened as needed. Some even allowed fragments of themselves to incarnate. An example of this is the consciousness known as Merlin. During the time of the Orion drama, the friction between the two polarities awakened the sleeping magician. He became a guiding force in the drive to integrate from both a physical and non-physical point of view. Fragments of his consciousness would incarnate intermittently to spark a memory of the past and a vision of the future. He is gone by many names on many worlds, but he always mirrors one's own beauty as well as one's own ugliness. His energy has been present in association with Earth right from the inception. The Earth inception will be examined more thoroughly in the coming chapters. For the time being, it must be shared that this drama has been created to be a success. Most who incarnate upon Earth are involved to varying degrees in the Orion drama. Everyone is here by choice. The instant that one begins operating from a belief that humanity is here against its will is the instant that personal and planetary power has been surrendered. End of chapter.